Now it's starting. Okay, so welcome YouTube. Today we're going to interview Kai Hepner, OSG Champion for the youth division for men's 231. All right, so I guess we'll start off with how does it feel to be a champ? You know,
Feels good. It's still a little crazy. It definitely feels way more real than America's Strongest Team and Nationals and everything like that. Yeah, just feels a lot more large scale. It's like one of those things where like I know it's real, but it doesn't feel real, you know?
How did you feel with the production quality? Did you get to watch the streaming by any chance?
Yeah, I looked back at some of it. Not too much. It's kind of funny. I like did the entire comp and then didn't watch any of it. But yeah, it was amazing. I mean, they were on us all day, like on the live stream, and then they had photographers everywhere. Honestly, the biggest thing was just like the on the floor production, like not necessarily for the media, but more so the like the way they ran the show, the way they had us where we needed to be, whenever we needed to be there. It was just very put together. There was much more of like a schedule in place than like random local comps that I've done in the past and wherever. But yeah.
Awesome. So good quality, which is always important, especially for a high level show. I forgot to introduce Kevin. So Kevin's going to be on and he's going to be asking questions with me in case everybody's wondering why Kevin's on.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah, I was actually like I don't know. I called a couple people for the OSG wins. You were one of them. So I was like, and I think I was telling Kaz, I was like, yeah, I mean, he's going to win, you know that. And then like same thing with like, you know, the master guys, I pretty much had I already knew who was winning that as well. I was like, yeah, just because I've watched the crap. I haven't like competed in like a year now. So I'm like, you know, but I don't know. I just need to get back to it. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just watching everybody and making sure I can stay in contention.
I was thinking after watching that performance, it definitely made a lot of us want to compete.
Oh yeah, definitely. I wanted to get back to it like instantly. I'm like, all right, like, and then I'm like, you know, like I've had the itch now for a while, and then having to back out and stuff. So I'm like, yeah, no, I'm ready to go. And then like seeing Kai kick ass, I'm like, yeah, dude, we need to go and get back to it.
Yeah, man. You got to get out there with me next year. It's OSG every division. That's the goal for training center next year.
That's a good goal. It's definitely attainable now at this point, right?
Yeah.
So, kind of touching into that, other than just feeling like it felt more legit, what made it feel legit? Like, what parts of, you know, was it like the photos for like your competition picture? Was it like your name being on there and what country you came from? Did that make it feel a little bit more legit, having your last name on the back of the shirt?
The name on the shirt was huge. That's been my dream. Like since I played soccer, like me and all my friends would joke about like if you've made it in life, you have your name on the back of your jersey. So that was the big thing, like getting the shirt and being like, dude, I'm one of those people. But yeah, I would say probably that, and then just the way like everything was set and staged, like all the equipment matched. There were banners behind anything. There was like nothing that looked out of place. Like it was very just like I don't know. It seemed like a lot of effort went into all the details, which made it feel very like legit and a little bit very nerve-wracking to say the least. Like when I got there and I weighed in, I like walked by the door to the stadium. I was like, this is gonna be rough. But yeah, it was fun.
So when you said you won, obviously everyone knows at this point that you won America's Strongest Team 2023. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about it, unfortunately, and there wasn't a whole lot of other bids going on for that, right? There was the Foundries World's Strongest Junior, right? And that's like the only competition you guys got invited to.
Yeah, that's probably was the only real bid that you got off of AST. But kind of from what I've seen, and like this is just from what I've heard, but there's not a lot around that show in particular. Like one of the guys in our class was from Scotland. He was like, yeah, it's essentially a local show that they just invite other people out to. So it's like it's definitely one of those things where like everybody I think sees that like there's a vacuum there for the junior and the teen athletes. And a bunch of different people and like corporations have tried to fill it. Like USS did their thing, and then you have Starman Corp with AST. but it's always like a little passion project. Like no one's been able to actually be like, cool, this is the bracket and here's how you get there and this is the invite and the awards and everything like that. So it's been like very like a bunch of different people kind of competing to try to fill that, but there's no, at least there wasn't any like standard, this is the competition that sets out like who is the best in the world.
What do you think is the missing piece that we have for just getting the junior division bigger?
I mean, a big part of it is like strongman by nature is kind of a sport that doesn't attract like the attention of younger athletes. Just because like it's dominated by like there's more people in the Masters than there are in the Open. Like it's kind of like that. Like it's a very like blue collar boys wrenching on cars and picking up rocks type of sport. And then like not to mention like the world runs on social media now. So when you look at like who is interested in social media versus who is interested in strongman, it's kind of two different demographics. So like we just don't have anybody in the junior strongman game that has that level of like social media prowess. Like all the people the kids that are on social media are also like, I'm an aesthetics guy, and they're deadlifting, you know, a quarter of their body weight and slamming weights. So like, hey, calm down, you know.
That's very true. The whole 45-degree pull down thing really took off with TikTok in your generation.
Just put a D hand in every single exercise. You'll get huge, I swear. But.
Yeah, I almost ran over a couple of people doing that kind of stuff in the gym, and I'm like, yeah, yoke runs and like posing in a mirror don't really work too well, you know. So.
Yeah, we have a mirror right by our yoke, and it's like the most dangerous thing I can think of because it's so easy to break. All it takes is one person to overrun their yoke, drop it early, and it just keeps sliding because it's heavy.
Yeah, oh man, like I've used like the way the gym we used to train at was set up before the move is like there'd be a bunch of like physique guys doing legs, and then they had changed it since, but then like just as me and Tracy moved, they had put like mirrors right there. So I was like, they were anticipating us leaving that gym like once we got the house because they put the mirrors up like right as we were like leaving. And I'm like, dude, I could just see that happening now. Like, get out of the way. And then like an 800-pound yoke just crashes some like 120-pound physique kid, you know?
Yeah, PSA for anybody out there who does bodybuilding, don't walk across the place where people are running with 500 plus pounds of metal. You will get hurt. Yeah, there's been a few close calls with farmers and yoke of like someone walking in front and like dropping it and just barely missing, like destroying an ankle or two. So yeah, like look around every once in a while.
Yeah, you think you would move out of the way even if people were just doing sprints or sled runs? Like it would just be common courtesy to not get in their way when they can't really slow down, right?
Yeah.
But, long story short, what are some missing components you think that would make the junior division grow? Like, what do you think is going to be like kind of what made powerlifting grow for like juniors and teens?
There needs. I mean, I think OSG is going to be big for it, especially once it's more of an official show. Just because at the end of the day, nobody cares about anything unless there's a title involved. So like it's going to be really helpful to have an actual ground for that to happen and be like, yeah, this is where the best of the best in the world or in the country come and see what happens versus like a lot of strongman, especially like America's Strongest scene, at least when I went, was very like word of mouth. Like it's not like if you're good at strongman, you get invited to the show. It's like if you happen to hear that this exists, you're there, right? So there's like, I mean, like, and that's kind of evidenced by like that kid that's 19 years old and just absolutely smoked the entire 90 kilo open class at OSG. So like, clearly he would have destroyed me if he was in my class, but like, there's not enough around that division for it to be worth competing in if you have a shot at the open. So I think like building its own place and like its own division is going to be big. And then again, just more social media presence from the athletes is going to be huge. I mean, like, yeah, you can't get a sport into the mainstream anymore with the occasional monthly video filmed on an iPhone. It's just not the way it goes. But yeah.
So yeah, cutting into like videography and stuff, it seems like you've been really picking up a notch on that. Do you feel like prior to you like going on a social media hiatus on posting, you know, obviously keeping things secret up until game day, do you think that's pretty much what we need is just the higher video qualities from the athletes just going around to get like more of a social media presence?
I think it's that, and I also think it's having personalities on the internet. Like the reason even with bodybuilding, like the reason classic physique is so huge right now is because everybody loves seeing Chris Bumstead on stage because they know a lot about his life. And there's like a problem in, especially in strength sports, like even powerlifting, or like powerlifting, the creators aren't huge because you never see them talk to a camera. It's always like, look at this lift that nobody cares about. I picked up X amount of red circles. Like that's just the reality of it. Is like, cool. It's cool the first time that you've seen 50,000 of the same video. So I think like higher production value, not necessarily just quality, needs to go into that. And again, like I will say like that's kind of something that I was like starting to think about, and then signed up for OSG and was like, yeah, I need to keep numbers dark, not let anyone know what's going on, and just get the title and worry about it later. But yeah, I think that's really it. Is like more production value around not necessarily just the sport, but around the athletes and the creators within the sport.
So touching into that, do you think that OSG is going to give you a few invites, considering that you won first place?
I think it could if I tried to get them. I don't think it's going to automatically draw that kind of credential. But if I am like, hey, this show is happening, and I shoot whoever's promoting it in the DM, I'm like, dude, I'm currently the strongest teenager in the world. Like, well, not teenager anymore, but the strongest junior in the world. Like, when I get in, I think that's going to be able to pull some level of an invite. But no, I don't think it's going to be like, yeah, if you win OSG, you get pulled to chaos or whatever else. I think it could be. I think like next year when there's a title on the line and there's a progression for it and like ASTs are qualifier, I think that'll start to happen. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a move to go with. I remember before Strongman Corp and I want to say Giants Live or whatever. They temporarily merged for a bit when Lynn was one of the chairmen, but recently he kind of displaced himself. So I'm not going to speak for him in that sense on what happened there. But since that happened, I don't know what the AST bid is going to be for OS.
Yeah, it could end up being something completely different, but I feel like that would make sense. I hope whoever is in charge of that makes that happen. Just because it's way more fun to watch a progression up to a show than it is to just be like, oh, look, here's the show, and you have no idea who any of the athletes are or anything like that.
Because that's kind of what happened with America's Strongest Masters. Like, and Kevin, you can speak up on this if you want to. Yeah. But they've been talking about adding like the Masters division for the Arnold for quite some years, and I don't know if they actually have or not.
Yeah, as far as I know, they haven't. Because I did a show, I think in 2021, that was an Arnold bid, and it was my first, like one of my first Masters shows, and I was like sitting there like, sweet, I placed, so I was like, all right, and it was like a really, really fun show, and I'm like, hell yeah, and I kind of got on a kick, and I'm like, yeah, I was like, and then I got my like nationals invite, my Masters nationals invite, and all that stuff, and I never got like a Arnold one, and I was like, oh well, and then they had canceled the amateur Arnold because I think it was like 2021.
Yep.
And it was like, so when I was kind of like sitting there thinking, man, they should do, because then I kind of realized like, oh, I'm not an open anymore. I guess I'm not getting an Arnold. So, and I was kind of like disappointed in that because I was like, man, that would be awesome having us old guys battle it out. And, I mean, for the most part, like guys at that level and that are 40 plus, we're like damaged, but like, the mileage is just there. I mean, we're all million milers, man. It's like, but like, the problem is like, we're all still strong as hell and we're all still athletic as far as, I mean, you definitely see like, man, I don't want to do this in the sidelines, but like, we all just nut up and do it, and, it's a little slower, still heavy, but, it's definitely, it definitely deserves a big bid because, I mean, none of us at that like that are competing at a level beyond local. Like, like none of us are chumps. Like we're all like, I mean, I've had some of the toughest battles of my strongman existence in Masters because I'm like, oh my God, I should have just signed up for Open. Like some of the guys in Open weren't hitting the log numbers I was, and they're like overhead numbers I was, and I'm like, really? Like I'm an old man with like, torn up labrums and, like I wake up and I make sound effects, and I'm like still like, it's definitely worth it to the people that promote bigger shows. The Arnold would definitely be a hell of a Masters show because you got some monster competitors in 40 plus and even 50 plus too. I mean, you still got like, Mark Felix is still doing it and he just won again in 50 plus, which, and then you got like guys like George Pearson and stuff like that are still kicking ass in 50 plus. And then, I mean, God, like the 40 plus, it's so many of them. And obviously Matt Webb won Worlds, and like that's one of the ones I called too. I was like just watching his progression and I was like, yeah, I can't beat that guy. He's just getting stronger every year. And I'm like, yeah, that's who I'm going to try to when I was going for my bid when we were talking, I was like, yeah, that's who I'm chasing. Like, I'm just going to try to keep up with him because I know he's going to win. So if I can stay anywhere in that, I can, top 5 it. But, and that's kind of where I was hoping. But if making it to the last day for us would great. But, it wasn't in the cards this year because of the move. But, yeah, Definitely should have some higher level Masters shows that are a little less should be more to them, I think. Like just more like same thing with you. They like for the junior stuff, they should have more of a system towards like who's going where and
Well, I think they just had a hard time figuring out a good show to be like who's the best junior right now.
Oh yeah,
they just did that with OSG. Like before then, the Foundry would host a competition called World's Strongest Junior.
Yeah.
But the issue with it is it's in Scotland every year.
Yeah.
And it costs an arm and a leg just to fly down there. And most of the teenagers aren't rich, so
I'm
you can speak on
that. How are we gonna make that?
Yeah.
Because you got invited to that for 2023, correct?
I actually got an invite for both years, 23 and 24. And then right after 24, we got the invite. They announced the junior division for OSG, and I was like, well, I'd rather fly to Wisconsin and get a title that more people are going to watch than get the quote unquote world's strongest junior out at a gym that I've never heard of in Scotland.
So why do you think the Foundry show isn't quite at that prestige, aside from it being OSG as a brand?
Yeah, so that's really all. There's nothing behind that name. When I put on, like when I said, hey, I'm going to OSG, like it doesn't matter if I'm a junior or not, like the name of OSG means something. And like the title sponsors and everybody like that, like SPD, Cerberus, everyone's behind that show. And with the one in Scotland, like there's not that much presence to it. There's no one really backing it. And also like there is still something to be said for like America's the Hollywood of the world. Like you have a show here or you have any production here and it gets pushed more. There's just way more money in entertainment than there is anywhere else. But yeah.
I think that's a great point. Do you think there's eventually going to be an Arnold for teens or juniors?
I mean, what's interesting is there's actually a lot of stuff for juniors. There's not a lot of stuff for weight class juniors. Because like they had a junior at the Giants Live Log Championship who pressed in like 460 or something. It was absolutely insane. But like that's one of those dudes that's like the strong man, right? Was born 6'8" and 400 pounds. Like I'm never gonna touch that guy. So like that's really all it is. Like having a lightweight class is the main thing there. But they've definitely had like I feel like it's been one of those things where they've like thrown in little teasers and events at different big shows, but there's never been a standard like every year this is where the juniors go to see who is currently the strongest. So that's what I'm hoping OSG is gonna do for those guys. Unfortunately, I mean, just like I kind of got into this sport right at the age where I'm like, this is all going to be so great for the people after me. But yeah, so hopefully something good comes out of it. But yeah.
So do you think after your performance at OSG, it motivates a lot more people to compete in the junior division, especially for weight class athletes?
Yeah, I think if anyone saw it, yeah.
I guess that's the hard part, right? Because there's no photography, which is kind of where I'm going with my next question. There was no photography posted for the junior division.
We had photographers on the floor. They've been posting some of it now. they definitely prioritize getting the open stuff out sooner.
Why would
But
they
they're-
do that though if they already have a bunch of people capped out on them?
What?
They capped out all those divisions.
Well, I don't think it's about that. I mean, it's more about pulling money in for the live stream like next year. Like that's the thing is like as soon as they finish the show, they're advertising for the next show.
It was you and Philip, if I recall correctly, were the only guys under the age of 20 at your weight classes moving to 280 log.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't be there. But I'm saying that, like, again, they follow the money. That's where the money is. That's why that all gets prioritized. But I think you'll see, like, over the next week or so, there should be a good amount of stuff coming out because the photographers have been going through and sharing some of it. It'll be interesting to see how much of it OSG actually reshares. But
I'm hoping they do it because it seems like obviously they're like, hey, we're going to pick some favorites. And they post certain people that they really like that have a big social media presence. And that's fine. I get it. But it's weird because they're like, hey, we want this division to grow. But there was no interviews for the adaptive athlete. There was no interviews from what I saw for juniors other than Bubba Pritchett, right?
Yeah.
So, like, no champions. Like, you didn't get an interview. Cole Bolton didn't get an interview. And I think you guys more than deserve an interview at that point, right?
Yeah.
So, that's something that seemed weird to me. Not saying that it's wrong that they didn't do that, but I just want to know why, if it's ever possible.
A big part of that is there was definitely a like just even from like the events they selected to everything else, the attitude for this, at least from Lynn, was definitely that like this is for the purpose of us going out and having fun, and it's like a competition, but not a competition, right? Like standard T-ball stuff. But like it was funny because like as soon as we all got there, like we were hanging out in the in like the athlete staging area, and like I know some of the guys from like America's Strongest Teen and just from coming across them. And like we had like had our rules meeting, and they're like, remember, like go out, have fun, like don't do anything crazy, right? And we all got back and we're like, so we're all like killing each other, right? Like that is of course. Yeah. But so I think that's part of it. And I think a big part of that is just that like this is the first year they're doing it. And I think if they continue to do it and they make it an official title and they like run with this, then I think there will definitely be a lot more motivation for younger athletes to get into it. And I think I really do think a lot of it is like just promoters and people in the sport thinking about the health aspect of it for the younger kids, just because like they encouraged us not to water cut or anything for this competition, which I kind of get. Like it's the whole reason wrestling gets a ton of hate for kids, because like should you really be water cutting when you're 15? Probably not. But I think it's like that, and it's also like strongman is an untested sport, so like how much do we really want to push 16-year-olds to be hopping on trend to press an extra 8 pounds on a log? Like, probably not. But that's really, I think that's really what it is. Is like, I think it's kind of a dilemma for everybody of like taking what strongman is as a sport, which like it is very just like rust and metal type of sport, and like trying to push it into a method that makes sense for it to be like an enjoyable and positive playing ground for younger guys.
So touching into the structure of it, did you feel that it was weird that you only had 4 events? What was like the real reasoning behind that?
I think it was genuinely just scheduling. And also I think a lot of that was they made a point of picking events where like essentially with the goal of nobody zeroing, but still being able to show the width of the playing field. So they had like essentially like the Trump log had like 6 options, right? So it wasn't that like what they did at USS Nationals last year, which is the reason I didn't go, where they made all the weights so light that like if you knew what you were doing, you were repping that axle for 35 reps in a minute. Like no one wants to watch that. But they still want everyone to get a rep. So they had logs ranging from I think it was like 155 up to 280 in my weight class. So that if you had never moved a log before, you could get in there and maybe get a rep and go home happy. But then, me and Thomas could fight it out to see who's actually better at strongman, right? So like that was kind of the idea. And I think those were basically the 4 events where they could do that the best. Which again, like the deadlift ladder started at like 300 pounds for my weight class, which is like absurdly light. Like even the top axle was 500. I think it should have been at least 6 for the weight class. But that was just the nature of it. It was like they wanted everybody to go out, get their screen time, and not just like walk out and struggle to move something off the floor for 60 seconds, which you saw a lot of in the open division. But that's like kind of the way it goes. So.
Do you think that the open division had a little bit more of a fair weight matrix? Because it seemed like not that there was more zeros, but it seemed like there was more of a challenge going on in the open division.
I mean, my hot take from the competition is that I probably could have come in top 3 in the yoke for my weight class on the car yoke, and I think it was I really wish they had given us that car yoke because I get why they didn't, but it seemed kind of stupid to have them all there and be like, nah, don't run the car. You can have this little yoke that's probably 150 pounds lighter than it should be for the class. But yeah, and again, like I completely understand why they did it. And again, like that is part of it being an open invite show and everything else because it was the first year they're doing it. I think if they have more of the qualifier leading up to it, then it will make sense to be like, all right, let's really separate out the top 10 and see what these guys can actually do. So that's no hate to anybody who planned it or helped with it. Like it was 100% probably the best way they could have possibly run that show. But at least it just personally in terms of like what I would have liked to be able to show, it didn't really allow for that. Like there essentially wasn't anything heavy enough for me to be like, look, I'm stronger than these guys, right? Except for the log, and that's what happened.
And do you think a max deadlift, like a max axle deadlift, would have been more appropriate with maybe say 3 attempts?
I would have killed for a max axle. That would have been absolutely awesome. Or even giving us max reps like the opens. Like when I saw the events coming out, because that was the third one to drop, and I saw that the opens had AMRAP axle, and I was like, awesome, dude. I was like, I'm gonna get to go out there and hit 6 more reps than anyone else on the field. But
yeah, when I was programming you for it, I saw it coming. I was like, it's gonna be a lot.
We were ready. We were getting ready to show off my best event, but it happens.
There's a point where you kind of figure out how the promoter works, and you're just like, this is their style. Just run with it.
Yep.
Yeah, I've definitely called a couple competitions like that weren't. They had the competition set up, but I looked at the promoter and I was like, and I'll be talking with Tracy, and I'll be like, yeah, I bet you it's going to be this, and we'll go back and forth, and like and like usually both of us are pretty spot on at this point, but it's pretty funny.
Like his medleys.
I do love my medleys.
Cosplay loves his medleys.
Oh yeah. I actually dig my favorite thing obviously is overhead press, and I like carry medleys. Like I always like just blast them, and I'm like, all right, yeah, especially like yoke to farmers, or like if it's some kind of like carry medley, like for some reason I don't know why my cardio just kills it on those. Like I'm 350 pounds and 44 years old, and I'm like, I should be on my ass like as soon as I hit the second yoke, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I guess my ADHD kicks in, and I'm like, yeah, and like, I'm amped up in it
when you're carrying weight. Yeah,
that's awesome. Those are my favorite kind of carry medleys. But for me, it's like I just like mixing things that you would like kind of see a World's Strongest Man. So like at Newcastle Chaos, when I had you guys do what was it? Farmers, yoke, and then finger. Like that was something different. But I was like, I could see this being a World's Strongest Man someday. But I just made it, make sense to a local level.
I think my favorite medleys I've ever done. We had my first team competition. Obviously, we had a Husafel to Farmers at Newcastle Chaos 2. That one was awesome. And then I did Goliath, and we had a light yoke and heavy yoke. So it was carry the light one down, run the heavy one back. Which was pretty cool. I definitely want to do one of those again, preferably at a weight that's heavy. Because the thing with that one was I was in the team division still, so it was like so light that they were just 2 sprints. I think it'd be cool to see that separation of like who's fast on the light one versus fast on the heavy. But
Iron Goliath was a fun show.
So touching back into OSG. I was looking at the point spread, and obviously it was you and Kale were like basically ruling the team division.
Yeah.
So once again, Thomas Bjorvik does deserve an honorable mention because the man is only 175.
Yep.
So like, the fact that he was top 3 is
insane.
Yeah. So go ahead.
He could if he wanted to. I think he would have done relatively okay for himself in the open 80 kg. His press is insane for being that light because I want to say he's younger than me too. He's like 18 or I think he's 19. And he's pressing. I think his best press in competition was like 260. He's gotten like 275 in training. He had a near miss on 300 at a show a few months before OSG, all weighing like 170, 172, something like that, which is absolutely absurd. So yeah, definitely a very strong dude. He just needs some time to get chunkier if he's going to compete as a 231.
So once again, touching into OSG and your athlete profiles, I feel like it was a little bit of a disservice because he did win the U200s for America's Strongest Teen, and they never talked about it on the broadcast, probably because they didn't know, right? So I wish they would have done that for you guys, where they would have laid out like your competition win stats, or like, at least the relevant ones.
Yeah, and I do think a good chunk of that comes back as well too. Just the way, again, like with the promotion that we do for ourselves and social media and everything like that. Like there was something to be said for like, yeah, I didn't post anything really from this prep, but if you went to like, for example, like they had all our names hyperlinked on the OSG website, and like it takes you to our Instagram, and like I think like that's where they pulled the majority of the information from. And like there's 3 years worth of all of my best lifts, my awards, everything like that on that Instagram. So I think some of the guys just don't do enough to put themselves out there, and honestly I don't either, but like if you really want, like I think that's a big part of it, is like they're not going to do too much work to figure it out, but if you have everything there for them to see, they're going to talk about it. But yeah,
do you think they should have asked you guys what your last highest level competition show was?
They asked us for any accolades, accomplishments, things like that in that like quick form that they had us fill out. I think some of the guys didn't check their email, but that was the idea. Yeah.
Okay. So kind of going a little deeper into like the OSG structure. Did you feel like the carry medley, the sandbag carry medley, should have been almost a Trump weight, or do you think it was like very intelligently strategized to be like, hey, let's see who's actually the fastest here?
I think it was done really well. With that being said, absolutely nobody wanted to do it. So like we all finished our events, and like we were legitimately talking, like me and Kale were joking around because he was in second place at the time. He was like, can we just like, he's like, I don't even care, just let's go home, we don't have to do the last event. So like there was definitely something to be said for absolutely no one wanted to run that, which is, I guess that's a good thing. Sometimes it's good to have an event that just absolutely sucks in terms of effort. But yeah, no, definitely set up well. Again, like it let everybody get numbers on the board. It did let us see who was the best at essentially getting over it. But it was definitely the worst thing I've ever had to train for. So yeah, well, that's not true. Since I've been doing strongman, the worst thing I've ever had to train for.
What was the worst thing you've ever had to train for then?
Probably either wrestling condition or like soccer preseason, depending on the year and how fat I got in the off season. So
fair enough. Those are very hard to prep for. So yeah. I don't think I've ever asked you what your athletic background was besides soccer. What other sports have you done? You mentioned wrestling. Anything else?
So I wrestled for a couple years in middle school, and kind of got away from that. I don't really know why. And then soccer I've been playing, I think, literally since I was 2 years old. Just that was like the thing that I loved doing my entire life. I swam in high school. And I've done a little bit of everything. I did gymnastics. I did I played like flag football when I was like really young. But pretty much any sport that you can think of other than baseball, I've played it at some point.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good collection of sports to do for sure. Do you think that with you and Kale battling it out, do you think that the talent spread was like still pretty good? Like obviously there was a lot of amazing athletes. Like we had Mason Smith was there and he won under 200s.
Mason's another one who he's just not like they definitely, like those guys definitely had a bad bag going into it because it's a 231 class, like, and they're combining dudes from 175, 200, 231. Because Mason I think has 2 titles under his belt now for AST for 200s. and Thomas has one for 175. So they're both amazing athletes, but like there really is only so much you can, like Thomas is legitimately 50 pounds lighter than me. Like that's a pretty big disadvantage in a sport that's about moving the most weight possible. So I think a lot of that comes down to like, how fast you start growing. Like I think at the end of the day, when you're a teen and a junior, like a lot of it is just when you hit your growth spurts. Lucky for me,
Right.
I'm short, so I started getting wide earlier.
Well,
But
the
yeah.
other thing about it too is like weight classes are height classes. So,
Exactly. Yeah. And
know,
like by virtue of there not being that many weight classes yet, that's definitely a disadvantage for the later guys. But definitely a really good spread. Like the top five, like honestly, it was very, very solid showing. Carter Lang was another one. He did absolutely phenomenal and everything. But yeah, I think there was a really good talent spread there. Like there wasn't anybody that I was like, why did you sign up for this? Like it was all very strong dudes. So yeah, it was definitely cool. And I do think also like I don't think me or Kale would have done as well if it wasn't both of us there. We ran away with it because we had to or we weren't going to win. But yeah.
touching into that, it seems like a lot of it too was there was a lot more technique display on like especially like the log. Do you think that a lot of the teens had Olympic backgrounds, or do you think they kind of just learned how to split jerk and figured it out from there?
I think I think shoulder strength is something that takes a really long time to develop. And when you are 20 years old or 16 years old or whatever you have not had the time to build that level of just being stupid strong. So I think it's kind of a necessity for a lot of the guys you have to split jerk. Like for me, like honestly, I probably could have gotten that 280 log with a push press, but like it was going to be so much more reliable to split jerk it. There was absolutely no world where it didn't make sense. But yeah,
Right.
I think you're kind of forced to, like with everything. Like if it's heavy, you have to technique it when you're, young.
Yeah, because in training you got what 260 for a double, right? With the push press.
Yeah, I think that was my highest. But that was like I want to say like 7 or 8 weeks out. And my pressing strength definitely went through the roof. That honestly, it's kind of funny because that log was such a big deal, and it was like the highlight of the comp, at least for my performance. But it was a little bit underwhelming because I had 2 reps in training, and like realistically should have been able to knock out 4 or 5 with that log if I needed to. And I think it was a lot of nerves. The first one I like locked out in the split jerk and just lost it. They like didn't have the stability and the set for it yet. But yeah, I think that really is all it is. Like you have to technique everything. Like it doesn't matter. And there's an extent to which like even if you are strong enough to move it, like it doesn't really make sense to do in a harder lift. Like no matter what the event is, like it's harder to push press 280 than it is to split jerk it. So why would you not split jerk it? But that doesn't apply to sumo deadlifts. They're cheating.
Kevin, what do you think about that? Are you a fan of the split jerk even though you don't use it?
I don't know how to split jerk, to be honest with you. Like I don't know. I push press everything, and if I tried to split jerk, I'd probably land a lot of logs and axles on my head because I just don't have that ankle mobility. Again, I got big calves, and I'm just they don't flex. They just if I try to like split out, it's like that's gonna hurt. I'm not doing that. It's easier for me to just push press it. I don't like, I've tried to split jerk. I'm not fast enough. It's easier for me to just dip down and, throw it right back up. I mean, I'm, built like Frankenstein anyway, so my shoulders are huge. So it's like, I got a lot of base to push off of. So I mean, I think like when we were getting ready for regionals, I think I was like Viper in like 310 logs, and I'm like, like. I was getting pretty saucy on log. I was like, man, I can't wait to actually like hit a max, but then, I wasn't going to because I only needed to do like a 280 log, and I'm like, I'm just gonna Viper that first one, and then so I was like, the comp like I think it was for regionals, and I'm like, the Viper, like I wasn't even gonna have to like I don't know. I guess I just don't have to really rely on technique too much because I just have the brute strength. So,
I would
Like,
argue there's still a technique to the push press. It's just not as hard to learn as the split jerk.
no, yeah, it's different. It's different mechanics. Like for me, it's always been like it just comes natural to push press it. Like the split jerk seems like something I'd have to like go out of my way to learn and like take a step back and like take time. That I mean, realistically, how many more comps am I going to do?
It might create more longevity too, though, because if you get your mobility better and you move better.
Yeah, and it might
you can or can't do.
Well, yeah, it definitely probably be better for like carries too, because like I'd be able to run a little bit faster, and but it's like I don't know. I've had a pretty good winning tradition with overhead, so I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna why fix it if it ain't broke,
Right, and I'm not disagreeing with that by any means. It's just more of like like if you feel like you could be more explosive, that would definitely be like even just a small variation to do.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had a couple ollie lifter friends, and they were like, "Dude, if you learned how to split jerk, oh my god!" And I'm like, "Yeah, but that's going to take time." That I mean, if I'm in a long off season, which kind of like where I'm at now, depending on like what comps I wind up signing up for this year, once there's consistency in training, maybe I'll start playing with it a little bit and kind of learn how to do it and break out my lifter that I stopped wearing a bunch of years ago when I was squatting because I kept putting my knees forward and falling.
Not fun.
So, I will say there's something to be said for the positioning because like a push press, you're going to be stronger with a more horizontal hand position, like handles perpendicular or parallel to the floor. With a split jerk, technically you're going to still be stronger in that position, but you're going to be able to get more out of the legs, so you can rack that log in all the way.
Yeah.
If you try to push press from here, it's very difficult to like extend the wrists. So if you have a big old chest, you can set that log on here, the elbows underneath and the hands facing forward. I can't do that. Like the only way I can dip stably with a log is to tuck that all the way into the neck and have it facing right at me.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep mine a little bit forward, man. Sorry.
Yeah. It's basically just a matter of like, is your chest huge or do you have really good shoulder or like front rack mobility? And you need one or the other to be good at one or the other.
Yeah. I'm again zero mobility, just a big barrel chest. Just rough.
He's who I'm talking about. Where shoulders take a while to develop. He's been developing for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, speaking of the big log, do you guys plan on hitting a national record at some point?
Yeah, I got my eyes on that USS record. It's what 315 for the lightweights.
I think so for 90 kilos.
Yeah, I'm looking at cutting down to 90 and trying to get like a 330 log out of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the USS Masters 40 plus is like 370 or something like that. Last time I checked. Yeah. Like I mean, again, I've beaten that in the gym, but it's just weird because I haven't had them. Sorry, my dogs are fighting. Hey, it's not WWE. Stop. But I think I can. I don't know what I can actually do, and like right now, it's hard to say. But like, it would be cool to find out. I mean, like, I think 370 would definitely be able to be beaten, and again, it's hard to talk about it now because I haven't been training consistently. So it's kind of one of those things. Like I have to get back to it, and then I'd be able to say for sure whether I'd really go for it or not. And,
So, touching into future comps, Kai, have you thought about maybe going into the Natural Strongman League and maybe doing Worlds for that?
Not really.
Or doing the
I
Open?
don't know. I think with like nothing against Natural Strongman, like. I don't know. It's the same as like nobody cares about natural bodybuilding, right? Like sure, it's still impressive. It's arguably more impressive, depending on your views on gear. But like, I don't know. I've never been one, and like even that's how I even feel about junior titles. I've never been one to be like, oh, this title's easier. Let me go get that one. And like I even said that to you in my prep. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be really happy if I win Junior Worlds, but nobody cares. Like it's literally the most useless title I could ever get. Like I like getting a first place or like getting a top 3 at nationals and as a 90 kilo is gonna mean way more for my like actual level of how strong I am in my strongman career than junior worlds. So I think it's kind of that same thing. Like I could win, even, let's say I won natural strongman worlds, like it's never going to matter as much as if I come like top 3 at OSG in the open. But yeah,
that's a fair statement, because it's a lot more difficult to win, OSG, Arnold's, even maybe arguably amateur nationals, depending on who's there. But there are some guys that contended in OSG that were like within the podium that did do natty worlds.
So
So
again, I think it's one of those things where like nobody, like somebody who's going to win OSG might be natural, right? But they're not going to then go compete in natural strongman worlds if they can just go to OSG and win. So I think it's one of those things where you just don't ever see a very not a very competitive, but you don't see the most competitive pool that you could, because the guys that are strong enough to win that show are strong enough to go and do well at a show that gets more attention, that's untested.
And get paid if there's a paid show.
Yep.
Touching into that, what are some big competitions that you plan to do in the future?
I would really, really love to try to get a bid to the Arnold as a lightweight and in 2026. I don't feel like trying to turn around to prep for 2 months and try to go this year. I'm tired. I've been competing pretty long. But
also, I don't think there's a bid for it in the Arnold right now for you yet.
They've got
you would have to do amateur nationals first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they're doing the Arnold amateur qualifier soon. But I'll probably see if we can get a bit of that in 26. I told you this the first time, like one of the first times that we worked out together. Like my lifetime goal in strongman is to go to the Arnold and try to press the Austrian Oak. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously on the docket at some point. But that's probably a few years down the line. First of all,
numbers wise, you're pretty much there.
Yeah, but I gotta get
think about it.
But this year, I think the idea is I'll do a USS comp and see if I can get a bid to USS Nationals. Maybe go for either Pro Strongman League or something like that next year. But yeah, probably nothing crazy going on this year, just because I don't want to compete again until like middle of the year. And then there just won't be too much time in between then and there to get like up that level. So it'll probably be more so qualifying for the following year. But
so probably if I'm making sense of it. So probably doing what, Delaware's baddest to go for the log record for nationals.
Log record, right? Yep. Just
Kevin's hiding, so that's okay.
Oh, what was that?
I was saying that you're both going for a national record at Delaware's baddest, correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on the ticket for this year. That'll probably be my first one back, to be honest. And yeah, I'll try to definitely try to push the press and like try to make that record out of unobtainium.
Nice. Yeah, like, I definitely look forward to both of you doing it, because like you guys are both amazing pressers now at this point, and I think it's really cool because like we have literally like one of the best masters in the area, and then obviously one of the best juniors in the area, like pretty much going for the same type of record. So it's cool to see like what people are capable of in all the age ranges, which is really cool.
Yeah. Hold on.
But kind of going further along with that, so of course USS has a good tie-in with Pro Strongman League, and there are open signups for Pro Strongman League, which I'm sure you're aware of. That's where like their East Coast qualifier is, and they have a 90s competition that qualifies for bigger shows as well. And then obviously if you were to win USS Nationals or even be in the top 3, you get your pro card and possibly pro contract, depending on how that goes. I don't know all the details to that, but those are just a few details that I do know.
Yeah.
When it comes to Strongman Corporation, that is the bidding system for the Arnold.
Yep.
So in order to go into the Arnold, you would have to basically do a local show, a Strongman Corp. Then you do your amateur nationals, and then you potentially get your bid to the Arnold if you're in the top 20% of amateur nationals. So possibly top 10 if it's a big group.
Yeah. No, that's like I said, that's the end goal. And then obviously if I end up doing that, I'll probably end up pushing it and seeing if I can get somewhere else. But yeah, that's really that's where my sights have been since I started, was get to the Arnold, press the crazy log, and then just see what happens from there. But it would definitely be very cool to try to get a pro card at like 21. So yeah, we'll definitely have to see how that goes. But I think it's in the cards for me. I think based on, not even based on the shows or anything like that, just based on where the numbers are at and how I'm progressing, I think I'll be able to be very, very competitive, especially as a 200 within the next year or two. Ideally, at some point, I want to move back up to 231s, but it's just not overly realistic to do that when you're 21 years old, because I am not that big yet. But yeah.
I think 231s will be very attainable within maybe the next 3 years. It just depends on how much more you grow. Like if you get to the point where you're 250 in your off season, then sorry, my dog keeps moving the screen. But I think within 3 years, 231s is very possible for you, because you'll probably be 240 to 250 in your off season by then.
Yeah. I mean, I'm already like pushing pretty close to that, but I try to avoid it because I'm just getting fat. But
well, we need you to get a 700-pound deadlift or close to it by that point if we want you to like contend for an Arnold bid at 231s.
Yeah, 100%.
Because the press is there. It's just the deadlift isn't completely there yet.
Yeah.
It's close, but it's not quite there.
One of my things that I've thought about is trying to get pretty, if not at 700, getting very close to 700 as a 200-pound athlete. I think that'd be a pretty awesome deadlift.
I think that's a feat you can accomplish for sure, because you haven't even water cutted, kind of like touching into your competition experience. You haven't even water cutted yet. So like the fact that the fact that you could probably be a lean 215 and then do some damage as a sub 200, that would be very scary to compete against.
Yeah.
So I think that's something you could definitely touch up on once you get there, but that's more of like a long-term plan for sure. But I mean, a 330 log at 200 is insane. You'll definitely have people talking to you after that.
Hopefully, yeah.
Did you have any sponsors or like competition reach outs after OSG?
No, nothing real. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, there's not the attention is starting to be there, but there's no money in junior strongman yet. So like, as cool as it is to go out and do things that no one else my age is doing, it's not like anybody cares that no one else my age has done it, right? So, and I've said that a lot. There's a level of just like, I wouldn't even call it humility. I'd literally just call it like recognizing that you're not that important. That comes along when being any type of like, even like a weight class athlete or like anything like that. Like if you're not in, the NFL, you're not really, no one really cares. And I think like,
if you play football recreationally, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Like that's kind of the reality of it. Like, I might be doing things that nobody else can do, but it doesn't count for much. So it's definitely like, if you don't, I mean, that's really what I'll say. Like, is like we were talking about, like getting juniors into the sport. Like, if you want to make money off of a sport, or you want to like be really cool because of your sport, go play football. Like, I do this because I love doing this. And if I didn't, I would 100% not put myself through what I put myself through in preps to go to junior worlds.
Sorry in advance.
It's factually not worth it. Like that's just all it is. Like if you're not doing it because you want to do it, it is not worth what you get out of it. But that's the nature of the game. But,
I mean, you could argue that for all sports, right?
100%. Yeah.
Football, they deal with like lifelong concussion symptoms, right?
Yeah.
Where they can't even perceive light properly. But anyways, going back to strongman, I really appreciate that you say it like that, because I feel like a lot of people forget that strongman is more than anything a hobby.
Yeah.
And it eventually will probably be a paid job for some people, like it was with the Rogue Invitational. Do you think bigger promotional events like that will come into the junior division eventually, or do you think probably it'll just be like the Chaos Classic and stuff like that for right now?
I don't really know. I think like if anyone was going to do it, I think Shaw would do it with the Classic.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't think there will ever be, like, by choice, I don't think there will ever be a ridiculous amount of money, at least in junior strongman. because again, I don't think that's really something that people want to promote. And that's kind of why there's not a lot of money in any. Like that's why it was. Well, actually, I don't think this is the case anymore. But until recently, it was illegal to like pay collegiate athletes because they don't want to promote that idea to younger people of like sacrifice everything for whatever this is. So I think that's kind of the like even if the money was there, I don't think it'll ever get allocated there. But again, like at a certain point, like it doesn't matter. Like if you're 16 years old, just keep competing, get better, and go make money in the open. Like that's kind of like that's what I said since the beginning was like, yeah, I'm winning these shows because I have the ability to win these shows. Like that's why I'm going. Like if I didn't think I was going to win, or if I didn't think I had a shot at winning OSG, I wouldn't have gone. It wouldn't have been worth the money or the effort or anything like that. But everything I'm doing right now is just literally just to bide my time until I'm in the open, and now I'm in the open. So that's like this has been like where I'm at right now is like what it's all been for the purpose of getting to the starting point. But yeah, and that's again, that's just you just have to look at it that way, or you're not going to enjoy what you're doing. But
do you think that weight class athletes are largely underlooked because of how big the Open is promoted by comparison?
100%. And what's I would almost say like because like I think it's more fun to watch the lighter guys sometimes, and maybe that's my bias as a lighter guy. But I feel like it's like everyone says that like if you watch the UFC, no one cares about the heavyweights. It was way more fun to watch Conor McGregor dancing around kicking people in the head. And like
or Mighty
that's
Mouse.
yeah. But
Mighty Mouse
that's
is way
really,
more fun to watch than half the heavyweights.
100%. But that's kind of what I would say is happening in strongman now. Like it was really, really cool to watch the 80 kilos just do an insane feat of strength. But what I will say is I don't think that it will ever be reflected in the money. The same way that like everyone loves Chris Bumstead more than whoever. I don't even know who won. Actually, I do. It was Sean or something won the open bodybuilding Olympia this year. But like even though everyone was there to watch Chris Bumstead, the sport still favors open bodybuilding, and like the money showed that it was like 4 times the prize money for the open. And I think that's kind of the way strongman will always stay. Like it's about the giants. So even if more people are watching the 231s and the 200s, like the money's always going to be there for the freaks of nature that are 6'8". Those guys are there. That's always going to be the history of the sport is the guys that are doing things that just it's not even that like, oh, this is impressive for your body weight. It's just this is something that no other human being on the planet can physically do, and that's a very cool thing to be able to say. Which is that's why Brian Shaw was so cool to watch. Like it was like, dude, like no one in the world is doing what he is doing as well as he is doing it, and like regardless of weight or anything else. Like he is literally just undeniably the best at it. But I mean, I'm young, so it's Brian Shaw, but that's how Zydrunas was. So that's always going to be the bread and butter of strongman is like there's no weight class, there's no I'm the best at it with these conditions. It's literally you are the strongest person on the planet, and that's insane, right? But yeah.
But I mean, you could argue some stuff would be more interesting with the twist in a sense. Like, imagine if there was a basketball league where the guys aren't allowed to be over 5'9".
100%. Like I'm not saying
could you imagine how awesome that would be to watch?
Yeah. It'd probably like that's what I'm saying. I think at some point it will actually be more fun to watch the 231s doing what they do because the bar is getting pushed so much faster. Like nobody's broken Eddie Hall's deadlift record yet, but there's been like 6 new deadlift records in the weight class competitions in the last 6 months, right? So like the bar is moving up quicker for the lighter guys, and I think it's going to get closer and closer. So I think there'll be much more action and much more change of like who's running the sport in the lighter classes, which is going to make it more fun to watch and more fun to follow. But I think the money will still always stay with the roots of the giants, which is yeah. But
because touching back to watching all the weight classes, this is all bias aside. I think the 80 kilo class was the most fun to watch. They were literally the fastest yokes and the fastest sandbag averages out of all.
The 80s and the masters. That was what I enjoyed watching the most. The 90 kilo class was pretty cool, but that's just because I'm a pretty big John Hack fan. So I was just enjoying watching him compete. But yeah, like even like what was funny is like OSG doesn't have a lot of like bigger guys like compared to some of the other shows. So like the 105s were like basically the big guys in the comp, and they just weren't as fun to watch. Like and that's no offense to them, it was a really great comp, but it's just not as fun to watch somebody who is a solid 50 pounds heavier only lift like 10% more. The 80s were it's just insane to watch some little dude go and pick up a rock that's like twice his size.
It is crazy to watch for sure. But I mean, even like some of the women doing the car yoke, I was more excited for that than watching the heavyweights. By the time I got to the heavyweights, I was like, honestly, seeing these dudes drop 1,000-pound yoke like 20 times before even getting halfway. Don't get me wrong, I can't run 1,000-pound yoke, but like when I saw women like Chloe Brennan running the yoke in like 11 seconds, or seeing Rebecca Roberts like literally zip through like the runway, I was just like, whoa, that was awesome.
I can't remember her name. There was a girl that competed in 2 classes. I want to say it was Gabrielle or something. She was a
Aganolo or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But she was insane to watch. She hit the stone run twice, got all 12 stones, I want to say. And it was like, yeah, Claire Myler too. She was absolutely insane. But the one I'm talking about was a lighter weight class. But she competed. It was those two that did 2 weight classes.
And she's natural too, from what I heard.
Yeah, absolutely smoked the stones. Just insane performances. But yeah, I will say like that's another thing. And that was what was really cool about the Rogue Invitational, was seeing them split the prize money evenly, because like I had more fun watching Inez win that than I had watching anybody else. And that's, I mean, I know Inez, so it's like it's a little different. I was obviously rooting for her, but like it's definitely, there's definitely a lot to be said for, at least on the entertainment value side of things. I don't think the Opens they might not even be now, but I definitely don't think they will always be the most fun to watch. But
I think it depends on who's going.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, 100%.
Like when it comes to like open level competitors, like I'm a big Pavlo Koriaka fan. Obviously, I'm friends with Tom Evans, so I love watching him compete. But it's like I don't have as much fun watching like no diss on Matt Rag, but I just don't find him to be as fun as like 90% of the other open men. You know, like because he's just so slow and like he's just like very, very, very like stiff. So it doesn't look as fun to watch.
Don't tell him I said that. But no, there's like I think there is definitely, that is definitely going on. And I think a big part of like open strongman too is like part of why strongman got so big in the last few years is because of like the legends of the sport, like Eddie Hall, Brian Shaw, all of them were still in it.
And Zadrunas, of course.
Yeah, Zadrunas, and then like Thor was competing. He's competing again, but he's like just not what he used to be. But like I think there's a little bit of a hole right now in the opens of like who's gonna be the household name. Like there's not really, like I don't think there's any household names in strongman right now, really, other than Thor. Like even though like those guys are all really great, like most people know who Eddie Hall is, and most people, if you told them enough about him, would know who Brian Shaw is. But like that's like nobody knows who Matt Rag is. Like that's an example. Like even though he's a great athlete, I just don't think that it has the attention that it once had, because there's not any like defined rivalries. Like all the rivalries in strongman are what made it so awesome, because like every year it was the same 4 guys gunning for it. And they had super fan clubs, and like that's just not how it is right now. Like honestly, in any of the weight classes, I believe it or not, I think Inez will probably be kind of one of the first to develop that. If she can capitalize on the attention she's getting, because she kind of just ran away with it this year. Like she really is that good. So like that, I think that she's probably one of the people that could definitely make that happen. I think if Tom Evans can really show out with everything that he's capable of, I think he'll do really well and be able to get some of that going on. But yeah, I feel like that's really all it is like there's no one like strongman's a very individual sport, and people don't come to watch the competitions, they come to watch their athlete compete, and that's how. And like if there's not really anyone right now that's like pulling all that in, like it's not the most fun sport in the world to watch if you're not watching someone specific, because there's so much downtime and the events are so short. Like someone will put on a football game or a soccer game and watch it because like there's something going on the whole time. But like a lot of strongman is like watching people change weights. So that's like it is definitely an athlete fan dominated sport versus like a sport dominated sport. And from what I understand, that's different in other places, but at least in the US, that's just how it is.
Well, I think that would come down to just how things are organized too, right? Like you could probably, if you have the right money and equipment and stuff, you could make it to where, you know, you have different events going on at the same time, and you kind of section off the different parts, right? So like say you could have 3 different competitions, and this is like a dream scenario, right? You have 3 different competitions going on. and you have each weight class going, and as one's reset, we all focus on the other division or whatever. Like, I think eventually it'll be something like that.
That's what they do in CrossFit, and that's why the CrossFit Open got so big and got so much viewership, and then the people that run it kind of destroyed it. But that's beside the point. But that is what catapulted them into the spotlight. I think if Strongman can figure out a way to add that production value, and also a way to just not have the sport be constantly fluctuating, like that really is it. Like, not even in terms of the events, but like in terms of like what invites go where and who's running what, and like they need to set a structure, and it needs to not be so political. And like, unfortunately, I don't think it will be for a while, but I think if they can figure that out, it'll be a lot more fun to watch.
Well, a lot of it goes into who runs the best fed and why, right? And then who's paying more money than who, right? Because it's not even people are paying. This is just my 2 cents. I'm not entirely sure if I'm right about this, but this is what it sounds like from where I'm at as an amateur. It's like, oh, well, this show's paying this much, and then the next year they try to beat the cash value that the other the competitive competition had. So it was like the Shaw Classic went up, right? Now Worlds is like, oh shit, we got to step our game up. Then they up their price, right? And obviously the Rogue Invitational was like, haha, we're paying more than both of you. And then,
which again, that was actually Brian Shaw's entire goal of the Classic, was to force everyone to start actually paying the athletes, and he's doing a great job of that. But that really is it. Like, because at a certain point, because there's not super much money in strongman compared to like professional sports, like the athletes are kind of forced to cash grab. So I think what will eventually happen with that is the more they push each other up, eventually, like, it won't matter if one's higher than the other. They're all going to be high enough that people are going to go for the best competition.
They're going to go against the best people they can, which I think what OSG is a big part of, right?
Oh, 100%.
Where you basically know, hey, like, this is who we can agree is the strongest of like all of whoever's in my division, right? And that's obviously an awesome merit on its own. I do think it's cool though that you picked the right time to go in as a 90s, because they're finally doing pro cards for both USS in the 90 division and Strongman Corp.
Yep.
And obviously there's pro Strongman League shows too, but that's a whole different.
The perfect age to get in for the teens and juniors division, because I'm currently, I think, possibly, other than Cole Bolton, me and Cole Bolton are the only people that have an IST and a junior worlds title. But yeah, like there's not going to be anyone else that, at least for a while, that's going to have the option to even like run the entire sport. Like there's a world in which I could have my nationals win, my worlds win, a 200 win, a 231 win, possibly something like that, and Arnold, like that's so like I could be pretty dominant in every weight class all the way up to masters if I'm still doing it then, which is pretty cool. I'm glad I got into it as young as I did, essentially, because I'll have a chance to set up a pretty cool like record run. But yeah.
Do you think your athletic background really contributed to like your success with like learning the split jerk and like maybe even being just as dominant as you were for OSG this year?
I think so. I really feel like I didn't bring what I could have to OSG, which is kind of funny. And like that's kind of what I've been talking about. Is like I feel like it honestly made me really confident for my open debut, because I was like, I had some pretty crucial errors on some of the events, and I definitely didn't bring what I was capable of bringing, and I still won the comp. So like that makes me feel better, essentially, because like in training I got the 280 log for 2. I like, you could see it in the technique. There was the power there for 3 or 4 on the day. I only ended up getting 1 rep just because of bad execution. The yoke was like probably the biggest glaring pretty shitty event for me.
Going to the log though, you locked out 280 for 2 reps. You just didn't stabilize the feet. That's all. If you would have held it for like 2 seconds longer, I think you would have been fine.
I just didn't close with the split class fast enough. But yeah, the yoke was the big thing. Like I forgot about the fact that they had the sliders on it. I ended up running 130 feet and 100-foot run. Still pulled out second, but like again, like that's one of those things of like, I think my time was like low 17s, like a 17.3 or something.
Which would win you an open comp.
Yeah, but all that to say, I ran 25 pounds over comp weight in training multiple times, sub 15. So like there was definitely more there than I needed. And same thing with the sandbag. Like I did that sandbag run a lot better than I had done it in the past, or than I did it in the comp. So I think there was definitely more that I had to offer. But again,
Well,
like it
you've
doesn't
also
really.
never flown to Wisconsin and then
Exactly.
competed.
Yeah.
So there's
But
that.
it was definitely something where like it wasn't even like I felt really good on the day. It wasn't like I had a bad cut or anything like that. Like it was literally just I just didn't execute the way I should have. It was all just like stupid mistakes and not paying attention.
What would you have
Um,
done differently?
I would have pulled on the yoke now. No, but yeah, that really was it. Like the yoke was entirely my fault with warm-ups. I didn't really practice the turn. I just practiced the pick and the sprint. Um, and it was again like you can watch if you watch that back, like the second lap of my yoke was like 4 seconds
Faster than the
faster
first.
than anybody
Yeah.
else. It was insane. Like it was, I think I was like 12 seconds back and 5.5 or 12 seconds down and 5.5 back. Like it was a
You turned
stupidly
into
fast.
Fred Flintstone on the way back. You
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
just hauled
I mean, I
back.
caught Bjorvik got third or fourth place on that event, and I caught him when he had like a 20-foot lead. Like so, like there's,
Mhm.
and I beat him by like 10 feet too. So there was like again, like I think that worked out well because I still got to show that like I feel like at least not on the day, but I feel like in general I was the best at yoke there. That should have been my event if I had done what I could have. Um, and then again, like the sandbag, the part of the sandbag was I didn't need it. And I was very unmotivated to run a fourth bag when I didn't need it to win. So I just kind of didn't. But because that event is literally just how convinced are you that you're willing to go and vomit after you finish it? And I just like when I had the win already, I was like, I don't really want to feel like I got hit by a truck tomorrow. So I definitely didn't push that as hard as I did in training. But what I will say is I think that's a good problem to have. I think it's better to push harder in training than you push in comp. At least
Well,
when it's needed. But
well, for moving events, I would agree with that.
yeah.
Particularly. And honestly, there's some times where if you don't need to do it, you should probably stop, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, not everyone has heard my rendition of when he should have stopped on the log, but you did, right? So there
I
was
need
a
to replay
recording
that. I need to post that.
where I was just like, "Oh, you already won. Just leave it alone," because you thought Thomas pressed the 280,
Yeah.
and he
I saw
didn't.
him dropping it after my rep. Yeah.
I saw him struggle to hit the 250, and it wasn't like a bad 250, but it was a slow 250. I was like, I don't think he's got 280 today. Like he is strong. I think if he would have went into it fresh, that would have been a battle for 280.
Yeah.
But he didn't. So like he basically did a mini ladder, and I think that's kind of points wise what screwed him up on the
A lot
log.
of people did that too. It was actually really interesting. Nobody went. I was the only person to even attempt the heavy one fresh, and I think I was actually the only person to start heavy and work my way back down. Like not even just with the heaviest log. Everyone like started and worked their way up.
Which takes more energy.
Yeah, doesn't make sense. Like miss it and go back. But yeah, and that's kind of something that like I was talking to Haley about in the stands. Like we were watching some of the open competitors on Friday and Saturday. Or I guess it was Friday that they had the logs, and it was like it seemed like we kept being like, did they practice this? Like it seemed like people just like I don't know if it was nerves or what, but they just threw their technique out the window on the log. And like even their strategy, like they didn't stick with what they strategized before they went out. And you would just see them like clean it lazy or like not commit to the and it just didn't make sense. It's like this is an event. Like you had 6 months to train for this. Like like make your technique good. Like just because you hit the number in training because you're strong enough doesn't mean that you can do it on a comp floor. So you need to have your events look the same every single time. Like you saw it even on the rep that I missed. Like my clean was so good that the announcers commented on it. Like then that was something we practiced. Like we were doing sets of just the clean because like on an event like that, the clean matters way more than the press. If you get a log in the wrong position, it is not going up no matter how strong you are.
Agreed.
But that's really I think that's again, I think that's part of strongman being the style of sport that it is, where it's like regular people that compete in it. There's a lot of people that are pretty genetically gifted, but they're not athletes. They don't have that background of like understanding how to compete and understanding that like every 1% that you can put into something gets you points. So I think a lot of people, I think there's a tendency, especially in strength sports, of like you have the people that are like, you know, the science bros in bodybuilding, but then you have in strength sports, like you have this idea that like, yeah, rip your smelling salts and grip it and rip it. Like that's like the way that it's like addressed, which is a really important thing to be able to do, because we saw that in America's Strongest Team. The only reason I won that comp, I was the weakest guy there, and the only reason I won that comp is because the people didn't compete well, because they didn't have that ability. Like they're not good on the comp day. They showed up and they weren't like on go mode. But I think the flip side of that is you have the people that the only thing they know how to do is be on go mode on comp day, and they don't take that attitude to their training. So they go in and they train half-assed, or they randomize it, or they don't think about what they're doing, and then they show up on comp day and they might have all the adrenaline in the world and be ready to go, but if you aren't good enough, it's not going to move, right?
And I think the other thing that touches on that is a lot of youth athletes aren't following the programs.
100%. Yeah. Like, dude, like, yeah. Like that was a big thing I talked about. Like I saw people lifting like 3 days before the comp. I was like, what are you doing, dude? Like that was
Aiming to fail.
There was like I'm not gonna call anyone out, but like dudes were maxing out like 3 days after the comp, and I was like,
yeah, you sent me videos, and I was just like,
yeah,
I was just like, why would you do that to yourself? You're literally just guaranteeing that you're not gonna do well.
Like you're already wrecked. You're gonna feel like garbage. You just threw off the first 9 weeks of your next training cycle, and like the biggest thing for me is like you're 19, 20 years old. Maybe some of these guys are 15. Like you're not going. As strong as you are now is not going to matter long term for your career. Like there's pretty much not a world where you should ever be maxing out when you're my age if you're competing. Like max out at your comps, because the only like that again, that's kind of what I was talking about. Of like my goal has never been to win America's Strongest Teen or to win Junior Worlds. My goal has been to go to the Arnold and compete as an open, because those are the titles that matter. So if I was going to show up on the OSG stage and like I was going to have to get injured in my training to show up there, I would skip the comp and I would build for the next 15 years so that I can be good as an open. And I think a lot of them don't think about that. Like if you're 20 years old, yeah, you might be a little more resilient, but you're still strong enough to get hurt. And if you hurt yourself now, that's more than like that's 85% of your career gone.
Well, that was something we talked about when you did America's Strongest Teen. The main thing that I kept repeating to you was you're strong enough to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why like RP6 and RP7 are such a beautiful thing, right? So like
America's Strongest Teen was where I learned the first time to not fuck up on my program. Like that, because I was doing some dumb stuff in that prep. And I figured it out by the end, and I think I did it early enough to still pull out the win. But like with OSG this year, like there was like 2 weeks at the beginning where my intensity was a little too high, and then I dialed it back and we literally just stuck to the numbers. And I think a big part of that was just the confidence. Like I've always had this, like with other comps, I was like, I need to know I can hit comp weight. So I was like trying to hit it early. And with this one, I was like, it's going to be there, follow the numbers. And we ended up building my log by like a solid 50 pounds pretty quickly. So it was definitely a learning experience to be like, trust the program, follow the numbers, just be as good as you can on the given day, move things smooth, don't get hurt, show up, win. Like that was my big thing for this comp. Like I treated the comp like it was part of the program. Like from day one, I was like, the entire purpose of this prep is so that we can show up and follow the program and do what we need on these events to win. Like it was never. The weird thing was I was never nervous for this competition. Like I thought I would be, and like 2 weeks out, I was really stressed out about it. Like just like freaking out for no reason. Like I wasn't even like nervous about the comp itself. I was just like physically anxious.
And you messaged me about it too. You were like, "Oh, I think this guy might beat me," and I was like, "Nah, I think you're good."
And it was one of those things.
I saw his log, and I was like, "Nah, you're good, man." Yeah. And I saw his yoke. His yoke was really good. I'm not gonna say his name. I'm not gonna be that guy. But
it was funny because that was the big thing. Like as soon as I finished my training cycle, all the nerves went away because I was like, all right, we did everything we needed to do, and if we don't win, it's because somebody else is better. But I definitely went into this comp way calmer than America's Strongest Teen. And like I really did feel like from the moment I walked out that I was just there to execute and go home. And right after the first event, like I wasn't like, yeah, I got the log. I literally just like walked off and was like, the yoke is next. Like it was a very different experience for me. Because my background is being a broccoli head power lifter and ripping things off the floor, trying to get as angry as possible so I can pick up more weight. And this was definitely a much more like technical prep and execution. And I think that worked better for me. I think that's going to take me a lot farther too. But
do you plan on getting into powerlifting for your off season, or is it more of just like something you'll do as like a background, like off season
I
training?
always say that I'm going to. And then I powerlift for like 4 weeks, and I remember that it's the most boring sport on the planet.
Golf.
Yeah, besides golf. Golf's not a real sport. Powerlifting is a now. But that's the big thing. The reason I always say that I'm built for sumo. I could 100% mess around and pull some crazy sumo numbers. So I always like want to pull sumo, but I want to have a reason to pull sumo. But
like
it just yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. Like that's the biggest thing. Like there's no reason for me to go and compete in powerlifting if I'm already winning strongman titles. Like it's just time off the prep. It doesn't, I don't know. It's yeah. I love squat, bench, and deadlift. That's another thing is I just like benching. So like I just need to learn to like include bench in my strongman training instead of being like I have to powerlift to bench and sumo deadlift. But yeah, it's I don't know. I realistically like I think I will always, for the rest of my life, every offseason say, I'm going to powerlift this year, and then I won't do it.
and that's fair. And tell you what, you can always just do like a completely unplanned meet.
Yeah, there's always that option. If my deadlift's already at 700, we might just see what happens. But
I think that'd be fun. And honestly, it would be fun to point it out and be like, hey, like I haven't benched in X amount of months, but I could still move this.
Yeah, no, I definitely I think I will say I think out of everything that we do in terms of how you coach me, that I think the biggest thing that like gets me ahead of people is just the amount of squat and sandbags that we do in the building phase. And that might just be the way I respond, especially to the sandbag. I think I respond really well to sandbag. But like I think there's a tendency for people to kind of make the training get harder or like or feel like the training is harder the farther they get into their prep.
The training should be easier by the time you get to the end of it.
For us, like the way that we run our program, like it's literally like dude, like the first 8 weeks of a prep are just the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Like it's so much like stress on cardiovascular. It's so much volume. It's not necessarily volume, but so much heavy volume. And just like so much of like this sucks, go do more of it, right? And like and not that sounds CrossFitty, but like I mean more so like this is what you're bad at and it's going to make you better, go do way more of it than anyone else is going to do.
Well, and that's the difference between fifth and first, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like that, and that's I think it's a big part of it. I think a lot of people just train their events and they train their deadlift, and you don't need to squat if you're a strong man. People squat for their ego, and that's it. And like for me, like squat's always been literally just a building event, and I think you see that pretty quickly. Like when I go out for a sandbag or a yoke or like even a log to an extent, but just like I mean, like I have my legs are bigger than everyone else's on the field, and the power I get out of it is just better. Like that was the biggest thing for me. It was like watching my yoke versus everybody else. A lot of the yokes looked like it was like trying not to fall over as you were running, and my yoke was like, yeah, this is pretty much my squat. Like it felt so absurdly light that I could pretty much just run with it however I wanted to. And I think a big part of that is just I'm used to more squatting, and I just don't. All that to say, I don't think strongmen squat enough.
And they should squat more. I agree.
100%. Yeah.
But touching into squat, like I know a lot of people argue on this, and there's some amazing strongman coaches that don't think you need to squat to be a good strongman, and there's argument for it, sure, whatever. But honestly, if you look at all of the heavy loading events, they're all squats.
Squat based. Yep. Yeah.
Log has a squat in it. You're correct. The clean is a squat.
Dude, so if you do like, if you want to be good at stones, safety bar squat. Like that is literally the answer to getting good at stones. Because I mean, there's no better way to develop more power of your hips and low back working together than a squat. Like it is the heaviest loadable movement for that area. But yeah.
And we touched a lot on like front loaded movements and stuff like that too. And the main thing that I noticed a lot of teens not work on that you did was conditioning.
Mhm.
Like you went to the point where even your body said, "Now you're gonna stop." You know, like your conditioning was so good that your body literally just said, "Nope, you're done. You're done. Just stop."
That's a thing that I think a lot of people get wrong is like with moving events, like they're like, oh, it's just a minute. So number one, they either feel like their cardio is just good enough already,
Mhm.
or they have that attitude that like, oh, I'm just gonna push through. And I'll be able to do it on comp day, which is like the worst words you can ever say.
Depth will be there on comp
Yeah,
day.
that will be there on comp day. But that's the big thing for me. Like I've always, train harder than you compete. But also like that's been part of like I said, I wrestled, I played soccer, like conditioning is always the answer in every other sport. And I think to an extent it kind of is in strongman too. And I think a lot of people miss out on that. The weird thing is I think there's a lot of strongman competitors that didn't do other sports before they started.
And that's very true, especially for your group.
Yeah, but it is interesting because like I don't know if that's like that I actually thought about it or just that's the attitude I had for my other sports. That's how I trained for this. But yeah, like when I was playing soccer, like I had a pretty good shot. My touches were okay. I was good at soccer because I could play a full 90 minutes and never feel like I was out of breath. So I would if it was 44 minutes into the half and I was going to sprint 100 yards for goal, I was going to do it easily and the dude next to me was going to throw up. So like that was what made me good at that sport. That's what made me good at wrestling is like we'd be to the end of a 2.5 hour practice, just everyone hates their life and I'm still on go mode because I did my road work and I did my sprints and I did my burpees and everything else. Like I've always just picked the worst form of conditioning I could think of and done it more than everyone else. And like I've definitely fallen off of that from strongman. like I definitely do a lot less conditioning work now, but I need a lot less. That's just the reality of it. I'm still probably doing 4 times as much as anyone else in the sport. But compared to what I did when I was a ball sport athlete, it's very different.
Right. And the way you prep for it is obviously drastically different too.
Oh, 100%.
So the phases
I don't need to go run 10 miles.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of touching into that, I feel like a lot of especially youth athletes, like you mentioned, they focus more on the static lifts to the point where they rob themselves of a moving event. Like there was a lot of guys in your division where some of them didn't even finish the yoke.
Yep.
And it wasn't that heavy, to be honest with you.
That's how we prepped me for this comp too. We knew the static lifts were going to be my weak point. At America's Strongest Teen, I didn't win any static lifts. I won all the moving events. That's why I took it home. With this comp, we wanted to get my static strength up, so that was the prep. But that being said, we did that with the knowledge in mind that I was going to do well enough on the moving events either way, because I have a 17-year athletic background and I was still doing my conditioning. So that's something where like I definitely didn't prep the moving events as hard for this comp, but it's because I knew that there was a lot more value in hitting that 280 log than there was in being 0.07 seconds on the sandbag, right?
So getting your axle closer to 700 because that's what you would need. There was
that really was it. Like, and you can see that in the prep. Like I absolutely crushed the moving events. My log was undeniably the best there. The axle, like, I mean, to be fair, Kale absolutely blitzed that ladder. Like it was the closest event I've ever been in. But with that being said, again, that axle was light. I think if there was anything heavier on the field or a rep fest, I would have gotten him there. And that's just where we knew we needed to get our points. We knew we needed the static events because there's only four events for this comp, so it mattered a lot more to take home points on the heavy stuff and then do what we needed to do on the moving.
Right, because
it's interesting. Like as much as it was like some things didn't go to plan, like the comp went exactly to plan. Like in terms of where we thought the point spreads would fall, that was exactly what we thought was going to happen. Like we called that from the beginning. And like the happy dream throughout the whole thing was like, maybe I can just win all 4 events, right? Like that was like the little bit of like the joke throughout the comp or throughout the prep. But the goal from day one was win the deadlift, win the log. So yeah.
At the end of the day, you proved that being consistent is key. So you never left the top 2 on any of the events.
Yeah. You have to be good at everything, and you have to execute everything the same way every time. Basically, for the purpose of the fact that that's not realistic. So when you shit the bed and run your yoke an extra 30 feet, you're still good enough to catch up. But yeah,
I mean, honestly, that was just a matter of just keeping your hands on it. You just let go too early.
I turned around. I was like, oh, look, it's over there. But
and that's just getting comfortable with running on a sleek surface. So that was not really a novice mistake, but more of just like a not super veteran.
I've only ever run on like terrible concrete and turf, and neither one of those lets the yoke slide very far. So that was definitely
more like asphalt.
Yeah.
Which it'll slide, but it's gonna be like 3 feet.
Yeah. Sometimes it slid downhill, but the hill was this way, not this way.
Right.
But pro tip, if you guys want to get really good at yoke, just be forced to carry the yoke outside in the rain at night and then run it on a 35-degree horizontal slant, and do that again and again. And then when you start running on flat ground, you're going to feel really fast.
You will be really fast for sure.
Yeah.
Unless it's a parking lot show. But
But if you're good at yoke, you won't have to go to parking lot shows. So.
That's true.
Yeah. Be good at strongman so you get to compete on nicer equipment. That's my pro tip of the day.
or run your own shows, I guess, right?
Yeah, do what Cosme does, and just host your own shows at a really nice gym that has smooth flat ground.
It works out eventually after 15K.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that pretty much wraps it up for this. I'm gonna actually cut the stream.
Cool.